Okay. Yeah, that's a really big question, but quite interesting. And I think it's quite difficult to really identify any specific traditions here, but it's more rather, I think, how the field have expanded, and I think I've been around in this field for about 25 years, and I think there were some really sort of interesting developments and also new traditions that new aspects that have been added through the years. So the field, I think, in general, have been much more diverse, and also both the quantity and the quality have increased considerably. So, but I can see some important trends and maybe also some tensions over this year. First, of course, has been a big change in what we call our area. We have environmental education from the beginning, and in the 90s we talked a lot about ESD, education for sustainable development, and now we talk about ESE, environmental and sustainability education. And I think you can also sort of see different traditions here. We have a strong tradition back since the 60s in environmental education, and when education for sustainable development sort of became an issue, I think the field expanded considerably, but also there were some really strong tensions, ideological tensions between environmental education and education for sustainable development. So I think that was a struggle for quite many years, what we should call our fields, and I think it was a good solution, and I at least I believe I was part of that solution to call the field environmental and sustainability education. So because it both brings the long tradition of environmental education and also sustainability. It broadens the perspective, but without the oxymoron of sustainable development, which was sort of the problematic for quite many from an ideological point of view, who saw sustainable development very much connected both to UNESCO and also to more neoliberal ways of thinking about development. So I think that's one of the most important changes or different traditions we have in environmental education, ESD and ESE. And I think also there are a lot of things connected to this, because in environmental education was very much based in science education. So when I started, most of us had our roots in science education, biology teachers, a lot of us, and geography, of course, too. But I think what's happened during the last 10-15 years is that we got much more influences of people coming from civics, arts education, citizenship education, values education, and so forth. And I think that sort of have broadened the perspective a lot, and a lot of other traditions who have added to the science education tradition. And I think that's also changed the focus on the research object in itself, because I think in the field we used to be very focused on knowledge and learning of knowledge and the meaning of knowledge and what kind of knowledge and things like that, and so also knowledge as the sort of roots for, or the sort of basis for changes. But I think what has happened during the last 10-15 years is much stronger focus on the ethical and political aspects of sustainability issues. So I think that change has changed a lot, and I think ethics and politics are really important, super interesting, and it's really related to our field in a new way. And I also think more connected to that, to these changes, or is also a change from, or maybe not change, but also tension from more normative traditions, both in environmental education and ESD, to more ideas about pluralism, as the pluralistic approach as one of the most a fruitful way of tackling these issues. So maybe we can talk about pluralism as a tradition. In a recent study that we've been working with, we have seen that there are at least 160 articles in environmental education research which refers to or relates to pluralism. So maybe we can talk about the pluralistic research tradition here. And having said that, I think also we sort of can see a trend from a strong focus on behavior modification and the idea of moralization, more or less, in education, and a strong belief in the causal relationship between knowledge, attitudes, and behavior, and a specific idea how we should change the students in schools and in educational settings. To more, or another interest is now on the pluralistic discussions, sort of. So these discussions in themselves are more interesting to see what happens there, and how students and teachers discuss more wicked problems, the relationship between facts and values, where we don't have any specific answer. It's rather that the answers is something that we discuss, that we want to sort of develop in education. So maybe connected to that sort of, those two traditions, I think also we can see a tradition of measuring effects, which is very much connected to behavior modification, to a tradition of understanding processes, which is more connected to the pluralistic approach, I think. And also, when it comes to learning theories, if we go back to science education, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, cognitivism, psychological constructivism was very, very strong. And what we have seen, I think, is more that we have added more socio-cultural perspective, and not least pragmatism, as another way of understanding learning. So what I think all this boils down to is a stronger also interest of the role of democracy in education, and the green transformation, and the role of education in a democratic green transformation of our society. So that's a very broad picture of the developments, I think, up to now, and I think there are also some very interesting and important recent developments and traditions which we have added also. For instance, the norm critical perspectives, and I think about post-decolonialism, post-humanism, critical animal studies, which also, I think, they kind of challenge pluralism and the idea of liberal democracy, and it challenges from within. It's an immanent critique, and I think that's been very vitalizing for also the pluralistic perspectives. I think also that we've seen recently more influences from general educational theory and not least from didactic theory, which I myself think is very, very important. And what I see also is coming more and more is more influences from philosophy, or rather that more and more philosophers are engaging in environmental and sustainability education. Philosophers like Sharon Todd and Get Vista are now writing about education for sustainable development, or ESE. So I think that's I think that's sort of new traditions maybe that we have added in a way when philosophers are also engaging in our field in a new way. I think through the years, there's been 3 cornerstones in my research, and that is it's pluralism, it's didactics, and it's pragmatism. So I can say a little bit about each of them. Just I think pluralism, and especially what we call the critical pluralism, and I think it's also a way of looking at education in itself, and it's a way of looking at the most important purpose of education is students' intellectual and moral growth, and in the moral growth and in that growth, I think the most important thing is to allow the students to have a critical examination of different alternatives. And I think that's also a way to different alternatives of the future society and the world we live in and things like that, and to sort of see what kind of options do we have, and critically examine the basis, the consequences, and things like that. And I think that's a way to actually do the practice of democracy in education in itself, to see education as one of the most important democratic arenas for democracy in itself. And it's also a radical tradition in the way that it sort of questions the roots of the way we live, the political and ethical aspects of our lives and society. And it's a way to protect the autonomy of education. It shouldn't be used as a political tool to create specific citizens and a specific society. I think that would be very, very dangerous. I think, to me, the idea of critical pluralism is very important in a way to defend the autonomy of education, and also a way to practically teach about these issues. So pluralism, one of the bases. The other one is didactics, and I think what's important with didactics is that it's in the German and Nordic tradition. It's a long tradition. It's several hundred years old, but also that it has an interesting focus on the content and the meaning of the content, the educational content, in relation to its moral and political aspects. And it's also content in relation to different teaching methods and purposes. The didactic tradition also embraced the autonomy of the teacher, which I think is important, and also specific interest on the relation between teaching and learning. So it's not only about teaching, it's not only about learning, but it is the relation in itself, and I think that's very important and useful. And the third was pragmatism. And of course, I can talk very long about that, but I think it's one of the sort of foundations of pragmatism is the way it dissolves dualism, and many different dualisms, but one of the most important is the dualism between an inner mind and outer reality. And it does so by having a primacy on practice and the transactions between the individual and the environment, and the way we learn through experience and inquiry, through encounters with our social, cultural, and natural environment. It's also, pragmatism is also about a specific idea about democracy in education from John Dewey, of course, and also a way of looking at ethics as contextual and situational. And for more research reasons, I think it also has important methodological consequences. Pragmatism means that we can investigate meaning in practice, in processes. So I think that's my cornerstones and my position. So in this field. Yeah, that was a challenging task to pick some certain articles, and of course you have sort of a personal view on this, what sort of influenced me and other things that influenced the field, maybe, and things like that. But if I take it from the beginning, I think there was so much interesting, really super important research going on in Denmark in the 90s. Especially the development of the action competence approach. So I would like to pick one article there, and I take the action competence approach in environmental education by Bjarne Brun Jensen and Karsten Snack. It was published 1997 in Environmental Education Research, and I think that's really one of the key publications in our fields. And also an idea, they also brought a more philosophical and theoretical approach into the field in the idea of action competence. After the 90s, I think we kind of, it was kind of a shift there. I think the environment in Bath was very, very important in the early 2000s. And people like Andrew Stables, Bill Scott, Stephen Goff, a number of really, really important publications there. So if I can pick a few, maybe Andrew Stables and Bill Scott's The Quest for Holism in Education for Sustainable Development was published 2002 in Environmental Education Research, was one single important article, but also, and maybe even more, the two twin books by Stephen Goff and Bill Scott. It was Sustainable Development Learning, Framing the Issues, and Key Issues in Sustainable Development and Learning, Critical Review. It came 2003, and then they, yeah, I read them many times, and when I was a younger researcher, and I think that sort of defined the field very much. Those. I will also say something about, there have been a number of articles who have come with important critique and also imminent critique of the field. Critique of ESD, the UNESCO, problematizing the relationships between sustainable development, environmental thought, democracy, and education. And if I pick one there, we haven't got so much time, so I think Bob Jeckling and Arjen Walls wrote an article called Globalization and Environmental Education, looking beyond sustainable development, and was published in Journal of Curriculum Studies in 2008. So I think that's a good example of this more critical papers. For me personally, a milestone was the Scandinavian research, who was more in the 2010. It increased a lot in volume, and we got the opportunity to do a special issue of Environmental Education Research in 2010, and we called it Democracy and Values in Environmental and Sustainability Education, Research Contributions from Denmark and Sweden. It was just Denmark and Sweden, but I think it was sort of very much a start of the Scandinavian tradition within this area. And note that we called it Environmental and Sustainability Education then 2010. And there we can find contributions. It was me and Jeppe Lessa who edited this issue, but you can find authors like Leif Östman, Claes Sandell, Karsten Schnack, and important comments by Heila Lotz-Sitka, Phil Payne, and Arjen Wall. So I think that meant a lot, I think, for the Scandinavian. Well, more recent, as I said, my cornerstones, two of them being didactics and pragmatism. And of course, me, myself, and colleagues have been writing a lot about that. But maybe I shouldn't pick one of my own, so I picked Katrien van Pok's article, Environmental and Sustainability Education in a Post-Truth Era, was published in Environmental Education Research 2019, and also really bringing didactics and pragmatism into a new age, new area, and also into the ESE field in a very good and interesting way. Yeah. Another thing that's also been more and more important issue is which I haven't mentioned before, so I'll say something about now. That's the issue of emotions and the importance of the emotions, and there's been a lot of articles around emotions, and both ethical emotions, political emotions, and the meaning of emotions in learning. And here we also have important inputs from psychology. So I will take here one of the quite early papers from Maria Ojala in Environmental Education Research 2012. Which was called Hope and Climate Change, the importance of hope for environmental engagement among young people. And as most of us know, Maria Ojala published a lot of important papers on emotions and the meaning of emotions, but also many others. So, yeah, maybe as a final thing, some if you see some very recent and I think some really important papers and books which have sort of connected the critical global citizenship education together with environmental and sustainability education research. And I think this has been really, really fruitful because while the environmental perspective have been integrated in formal education settings, particularly in the Nordic context for many decades, other important political and social, cultural, and ethical aspects have been denied to remain sidelined. And I think this research and the contributions from global citizenship educations seek to bridge that gap. And I think that's an important thing for the future. Here we have the work from non-Europeans. I think Vanessa Andriotti's work is really important. Her book, for example, Actionable Post-Colonial Theory in Education, and also Tuck, Mackenzie, and McCoy's publication, Land Education, Indigenous Post-Colonial Decolonizing Perspectives on Place and Environmental Education Research from 2014. I think they've been really important. But also would like to mention the work by Louise Sohn, Karen Pashby, who published a number of articles, both together and separately, on this, bringing global citizenship education into our field. And I think that that's very promising for the future to broaden, especially bringing these global justice perspectives into our field.